Should we move on to Banfi?
Let's move on to Banfi. It's the other one I have.
Is it La Pettegola?
Pettegola. So Italians always put the emphasis on the last syllable. So it's the Pettegola. And there we are. We can see it up on our screens there. It means it's the name of a seabird, a redshank. But in the local dialect also, it means sort of the town gossip, a chatterbox, or a chatty, I hate to be sexist, but a chatty woman. So it has two meanings. It means a redshank, and I think the redshank has a sort of chattering song, which is where the little name comes from.
Well, I have to say, in terms of having a glass of wine at this time of the morning, this is fantastic. Honestly, what's happening with Vermentino in right through the Maremma and also in Bulgari, I really think is a powerful movement, and I think this is a really good example. It's got a perfume quality to it. It is slightly saline, which is one of the important things about Vermentino, but it's brilliantly drinkable. So I tell you what, here, since we're talking about tales of the unexpected, let's just have a look at Banfi, because this wine is another wine completely outside the box, because Banfi have made their reputation as providers of serious, ripe, oaked, powerful reds from their extensive vineyards in Montalcino, and these are Brunellos and Super Tuscan blends, both of them, and that is the engine room of high quality Tuscan red, and the explosion of interest in Montalcino can frankly, in the last generation, can be substantially put down to the arrival of the Mariani family in Montalcino from the USA in 1978. And by 1983, they'd built a vast estate of 2,830 hectares. That is the largest contiguous estate in Europe. The Marianis called Castello Banfi their impossible dream. Well, given that there were only 100 hectares of vines in Montalcino when the Marianis arrived, you can see they created a bit of a stir, especially so because they didn't initially just plant Sangiovese. They planted massive amounts of Moscadello. But before you laugh, Moscadello, traditionally, hundreds of years ago, was the normal grape in Montalcino, not Sangiovese. So the Marianis did sort of know what they were doing. But this sure as hell woke Montalcino up. And since the Marianis were the biggest wine importers in America, their Brunello, when they made it, headed straight to the States. And so it created a massive interest in Brunello, where very little had existed before. So the locals may have huffed and puffed, and I'm sure they did, but they can now huff and puff inside an Alfa Romeo instead of on the back of a bicycle. Yes, anyway, why have we got a white wine? And where's it from? Montalcino? No. It's from the Vermentino grape, and it's from the Tuscan coastal area, the Maremma, with just a little bit of Bulgari. Bulgari, isn't that where Sassicaia comes from, where Ornellaia comes from? Yes, and these are the current coastal superstars, and they're big and dark and red. Yes, but it is possible the future star could be white, because no less a visionary than Angelo Gaia told me that in the medium term, he sees the future of Italy as white, not red. And the first person to offer me a glass of Maremma Vermentino and say, here, try this, was Piero Antinori. Well, those two guys know a future trend when they see one. Well, so do the Marianis, because they've been involved with various sorts of wine. Wait for it. Lambrusco, coolers, blushes, fizzes. But the point is, they've always been first in, so that they can ride the wave. And so when they decided to move up market, that is exactly what they did with Montalcino, seeing where it could go, riding the wave upwards. And if they decide that Vermentino is the next big thing. Well, don't bet against them. But in a way, it's back to the future, because the original Bulgari DOC was for white and pink wines only. The locals said reds won't ripen. And anyway, the locals, they didn't drink their own wines if they could help it. They said they tasted of salt. Well, what is the hallmark of Vermentino? Salinity. This is a grape that needs the sea breezes to thrive. The closer you get to the coast, all the way from Liguria in the north, right down to the Roman Lazio in the south, the more the northwesterly wind blows as you get closer to the coast, and the saltier the wines become. And there is some very good inland Vermentino on some volcanic tufa, but the future is on those sandy seaside soils, sometimes streaked with chalk, where the reds won't ripen. And the Maremma IGT, which was established with reds in mind, is now 30% Vermentino. So now this here, well, it's you could say it's really simply made. It's high yields in the vineyards. It's machine harvested. It's got a cool, straightforward stainless steel fermentation. They've fined it. They've given it sterile filtration. There's 4 grams of sugar in it. There's 6 grams of acid. It's got a screw cap. They've bottled it, and now we're drinking it. It's sort of, that's it. And it shows that a modern, mechanized type of wine can be absolutely delicious. And indeed, pretty serious wine commentators in Italy are now saying that Vermentino could be the next Sauvignon Blanc. Well, perhaps it can. Let's just want to have one more mouthful of this.
Yeah, I get a sort of almost orange flower, orangey sort of. There's a hint of something there for me, which I think is also...
You're right. It's a citrus flower, isn't it? It's
Yes.
That lovely world of sort of orange flower, lemon flower, not the actual oil itself. There is, even though it hasn't really had much, it's got a little bit of lees on it probably, but it hasn't been given all the heavy treatment, but it has got lees weight to it. I mean, there is a little bit of oatmeal somewhere in there, which is delightful. The acid is absolutely delightful. There's a slightly salted, toasted, hazelnutty quality, which is that saline thing coming through. But it's the fruit and the acid and the freshness and the sheer drinkability, which I think is tremendous. But by the way, just talking about sustainability, it's worth mentioning with Banfi, talking of trends again, that they do have put their back into sustainability in a fairly serious way, and also research. They've done tons of research on Sangiovese, for instance. They found 650 clones of Sangiovese on their estate alone. And so they've been researching all that sort of stuff. They are always experimenting with densities and with trellising and this kind of stuff. They've also taken this whole global warming thing in Tuscany really seriously, and they're planting all kinds of heat-resistant varieties to see which ones are going to work. They've developed a fascinating new stainless steel oak hybrid vat system. Oh, they've reduced their bottle weight by 40% since 2009. That is an awful lot of tons of glass that don't have to be made anymore. They've reduced their vineyard water by 80%. I mean, Banfi are an impressive operation. You don't have to think too much about the old Lambrusco and the old Blush, but the modern Banfi is a pretty serious
one of the cleanest and most beautiful wineries I've ever been. And we had the honor when we visited to be shown around by John Mariani, who is extremely tall and very deaf. And we literally, as little munchkins, ran around the winery behind him while he strode forth, showing us all his favorite corners and telling us all sorts of stories. So it's a wonderful place to visit. Of course, they've got the most beautiful hotel there. They've got their own balsamery to make their own balsamic vinegar. They make their own pasta. They make their own honey. They're the largest producer of dried plums in the whole of Italy. So it's prunes. They're beautiful. If you like prunes, they are absolutely amazing. So it's an incredible operation. And
they're delicious. Yeah, the first time I went there, I think I had about a 12-course meal. I mean, Montalcino knocks the food into you in a fairly heavy rate anyway, but this just never stopped.
Actually, they're at the back end of last year, it sort of slightly went under the radar, but their Sala di Grappoli restaurant got its first Michelin star at the end of last year. So when we are allowed to visit, which hopefully will be soon, we can go and taste our way and drink our way around
I'm sure
the wine.
some of the participants are already noting down your email, Kate, saying,
indeed,
Kate, I was on your webinar. Any chance of a visit? It is worth it. You know, it's a very different Montalcino, but it's a completely different Montalcino from the sort of the tiny, trendy sort of single vineyard stuff. But it's a really important part of Montalcino as well.